When it comes to romance, good guys don't always finish last. But if they start out at the end of the line, how do some of them jump the hurdles on the rocky road to true love and push their way to the head of the pack? In this video, we're going to discover their winning strategy. Hi, welcome back to 100 Years of Romance, your decade-by-decade look at sex, love, and romance on the silver screen. Let's continue our deep dive into the romance movies of the Roaring Twenties. We've already looked at leading ladies of the silent film era, and now we're going to shine the spotlight on the leading men, starting with the type I like to call the Underdogs of Love. We find them both in romantic comedies like the silent films of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, and in dramas, which we'll get to in the next video, but let's start with the romantic comedies. Who are our leading men? Well, let me tell you, these are the guys who really put the comedy in romantic comedy. They all start out with some sort of social disadvantage. They're often poor and part of a social underclass like the prospector played by Charlie Chaplin in The Gold Rush, the shoemaker's son Harry, played by Harry Langdon in Tramp, 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 or the assistant tailor Harold, played by Harold Lloyd in Girl Shy. And on top of not having enough money to attract the girl of their dreams, there usually seems to be something else holding them back as well. Harold is so nervous and shy around women that he stutters and starts stumbling all over himself anytime he has to deal with them. Poor guy. And the women do love to tease him. The prospector has been out in the mountains prospecting for gold in clothes that looked pretty dapper when he started out. But by the time he gets back to civilization, if you can call it that, his clothes are pretty shabby and he cuts a comical figure that's just a magnet for bullies. And Harry, the shoemaker's son, on top of being destitute, is just plain goofy. He's a little childlike and out of touch with the realities of the world around him. Like when his father tells him they're going to be evicted and he asks, "Does that mean I'm not going to get my new bicycle?" And most people who meet him seem to get annoyed with him pretty quickly. But whatever their circumstances, one thing they all have in common is that they fall in love with girls who are clearly out of their league. In fact, the object of Harry's affections isn't even real when he first sees her. She's just a picture on a billboard for the big shoe company that's putting his dad out of business. Still, he seems to have a pretty good relationship with her. Harold falls for a real girl that he meets on the train, but she's rich and he's poor, so there's a little speed bump for him. But he's got a plan to overcome that obstacle, and we'll talk about that a little later. But what about our little prospector? Watch what happens when he sets his sights on a beautiful young flapper at the local dance hall. He thought she was waving at him. And later, he overhears her telling her friends that she's tired of this place and wants to meet someone worthwhile. Oh, poor guy. I know exactly how he feels. No fun being invisible, is it? And when she asks him to dance later, it's just an excuse to brush off a guy who's been pestering her. She sees the prospector as someone safe, but he's not even on her radar as somebody she'd be romantically interested in. Too bad, because he does cut a fine figure on the dance floor, doesn't he? Buster Keaton's character, Johnny in The General, is a bit of an exception. When we first meet him, he's a respectable guy with a good job as a railroad engineer and a steady girl, Annabelle Lee. But he falls from grace when the Civil War starts up and Annabelle Lee encourages him to enlist in the Confederate Army. Unfortunately for him, he's turned away at recruitment headquarters. But Annabelle Lee doesn't believe his story. She thinks he's a coward and doesn't want to have anything to do with him until she sees him in uniform. Another thing that most of these guys have in common is their active imagination and capacity for self-delusion when it comes to women. We already had a taste of that with the prospector at the dance hall, and later on the same girl happens upon his cabin while she's out frolicking with her friends in the mountains. But he doesn't realize that her flirting isn't serious. At first, she and her friends are just having fun at his expense. But then she feels sorry for him and is just trying to be nice, because she discovers her picture under his pillow. But when she suggests that he invite her and her friends to his cabin for dinner on New Year's Eve, he jumps on the idea. And boy, does his imagination run away with him. And if you've ever wondered where this famous scene came from, now you know. In Tramp, 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 Harry finally meets his dream girl in person. By the way, in case you didn't recognize her, that's Joan Crawford in one of her early roles. She feels sorry for him because she's just seen him being bullied by one of the competitors in a cross-country walking contest put on by her father's shoe company. And because it's in her nature to stick up for the underdog, she comes to tell him that he has as much right to enter the race as the other guy does. Of course, he mistakes her attentions for romantic interest, and when she tells him that she'll see him in California at the end of the race, he takes it to heart and thinks they have a date. And he even tells his pa to get Ma's wedding ring out of hock. But the prize for the wildest imagination goes to Harold from Girl Shy. Harold has written a book called The Secret of Making Love. The book is a compilation of his imaginary love affairs, and it's aimed at helping men get a better understanding of women. In the chapter called My Vampires, he advises that the best way to handle these women is with indifference. Of course, if you've seen our video on vamps, you know by now that these women would have had this poor guy for dinner. And in the chapter he titles My Flappers, he advises more of a caveman approach. All this bravado reminds me of Colleen Moore's character Pert from the 1929 movie Why Be Good, where Pert pretends to be a wild party girl because she thinks that's what men want. And it gets her into a heap of trouble. Does Harold's boasting get him into trouble too? We'll get back to that in just a while, but now we get to the meat of the matter, the hero's journey. This is the winning strategy that our heroes use to pull away from the pack, which they weren't even part of in the first place, and cut across that finish line. So take notes, guys. You just might learn a thing or two, or at least have fun trying. A couple of our guys get an early shot at being a hero. The prospector puts himself between his damsel in distress, Georgia, and another guy, Jack, who's trying to put the moves on her. And Harold has barely made Mary's acquaintance before he rescues her dog for her. Gotta love a guy who's kind to animals. Of course, none of this guarantees either of them a place in the girl's heart. Both Mary and Georgia have other love interests. But Harold does manage to capture Mary's attention by telling her all about his book and boasting about his many love affairs. And she seems positively impressed. In fact, he keeps her entertained for 2 hours until their train arrives at the station. So, with that encouragement, the only obstacle that stands in his way is his poor economic standing. But as luck would have it, he's on his way to the publishers and he's just that far from being rich enough to propose to her. So that's how his journey begins. Should be pretty simple, right? Well, we'll see about that. The prospector's call to action comes when Georgia invites herself and her friends to his cabin for New Year's Eve dinner. He wants to impress her with a lavish dinner and presents and hopefully capture her heart in the process. So he does whatever he can to earn a little extra cash. And when the big day arrives, he goes all out to get everything ready. In Tramp, 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 Harry takes the billboard girl's words to heart and joins the cross-country race, hoping to win the $25,000 prize and not only capture her heart, but save his pa's shoe company in the process. And on the night before the race, he's not at all put out that he's sharing a room with the obnoxious bully of a champ. He's got all the inspiration he needs. And in the General, Johnny's call to action comes when Union spies hijack his train, the General, in an effort to sabotage the Confederate war effort. He'll risk anything to save the General. It's the only thing he loves almost as much as he loves Annabelle Lee. But when he discovers that Annabelle Lee has been abducted by the Union soldiers along with the train, the stakes are suddenly a lot higher. Can he win back her heart? It might not be as easy as it seems. All of our heroes run into some setbacks along the way. Back in his mountain cabin, the poor little prospector finally falls asleep waiting for Georgia and her friends to show up for New Year's Eve dinner. But she's forgotten all about him and is celebrating back at the dance hall with her new man, Jack. And when he wakes up at midnight, he realizes she's not coming. Oh God, it just breaks my heart. Now here's where most guys would probably just give up, but not our little prospector. Nope, he gets dressed and heads down to the dance hall to look for her. And this is one thing all of our underdogs have in common. No matter how ridiculous everyone else seems to find them, they always take themselves very seriously. Does that work in their favor? Well, let's see. That same night, Georgia and her friends trudge up to his cabin to have fun with the little tramp, as they call him. When Georgia walks into his empty cabin, she sees all the trouble he went to make a nice dinner for her. She tells her friends that the joke has gone too far, but Jack doesn't get what's bugging her and makes some unwelcome advances. Ouch. It seems like the tide may be turning for our little prospector. Or is it? Meanwhile, Harold has been dreaming about Mary ever since he met her. And when a chance encounter brings them together again, he starts making some progress. So much that he adds a new chapter to his book, one that shows women in a more wonderful, more glorious light. And he even manages to show off his manhood by throwing a punch at Mary's suitor, who's just decked Harold's uncle. But his ego takes a blow when he goes to drop his new chapter off at the publisher's and finds himself an object of ridicule by all the girls in the office. To make matters worse, the publisher tells him his book is ridiculous and he's not going to publish it. So, there go Harold's dreams of striking it rich enough to propose to Mary. Can he make a comeback? We'll come back to that later, but first let's peek in on Harry and his cross-country race. Before the race starts, he drops off a love letter with Betty, the billboard girl. And she even seems to be flattered. Or am I fooling myself along with Harry? Anyway, he gets a late start because he's been tarrying with Betty, but he soon pulls ahead of the pack by running. And he doesn't even realize he's cheating because this is a walking race. And it's his sheer lack of awareness combined with some lucky breaks that keep him one step ahead of the crowd, like when he misses this turn. Or when he climbs onto some private property. Oh, looks like he's in trouble. But he lands on his feet and gets to take a shortcut when everyone else has to turn back. But his big setback comes when he's arrested for stealing from a farmer. And that little stunt lands him in a prison chain gang. Will he ever find his way back into the race and into Betty's heart? Before we come back to him, let's see what's happening with Johnny and the General. Before he finds out that Annabelle Lee has been abducted, Johnny does his best to recapture his second love, the General. And although he doesn't suffer any major setbacks, he does run into and overcome a lot of minor setbacks, like trying to get the train under control, getting lost in enemy territory, and braving the weather and hunger. When he sneaks into a mansion looking for food, he discovers just what's at stake. First, he overhears a plan for a surprise attack on the Confederates. And then he discovers that Annabelle Lee is being held hostage. This is his second call to action, and he rises to the occasion. Will he manage to rescue her and the general? Well, we'll get back to his story later, but first, let's look at how our heroes deal with their setbacks. Our little prospector spends New Year's Eve looking for Georgia with no luck. But the next day, he does have a stroke of luck when another prospector who's discovered the mother lode hires him to help mine it. But he's got another major setback in store for him. Georgia is still in love with Jack. And when he arrives at the dance hall on his way out to the mine, not only does Jack continue to bully him, but he purposely misdirects a love note from Georgia to him as a practical joke. Of course he takes it seriously, and he promises Georgia he'll be back for her after he strikes it rich. So he takes his last major setback and the encouragement he gets from his misunderstanding as a thrust block for his latest and greatest call to action. He heads out into the bitter, cold, snowy winter landscape to seek his fortune and bring it back to his beloved, which comes with a certain amount of hazard. Will he make it? And will Georgia still be there when and if he gets back? And then there's Harry. He lucks out when there's a prison break and manages to escape in the confusion. And he manages to catch up to the other racers by hopping a freight train, which lets him off right along the race course. He even manages to lose his ball and chain. And just watch how he gets rid of the competition. And when poor Harold learns that his book won't be published and he'll never be rich enough to win Mary's hand, he sets a bit of self-sabotage in motion by throwing the game and hurting her so she won't hurt him first. He tells her that all those sweet nothings he said to her were just an experiment, that he says those things to all his girls and he didn't really mean it. He even goes so far as to laugh at Mary for having believed his sweet nothings. In fact, he hurts her so badly that she goes ahead and accepts the other guy's marriage proposal even though she doesn't want to. How is he ever going to get himself out of this one? And what about Johnny and the General? Johnny rescues Annabelle Lee from the Yankees, and then he has to rescue her again from his own rescue. But soon the two of them are working together to defeat the enemy and prevent the surprise attack. But he still has a hurdle to jump because he's still not wearing a uniform, at least not the right one. But in the end, after he turns in a Union prisoner that he's captured, he's rewarded with a Confederate uniform and she can finally see him for the hero he is. Just like Johnny, most of our other heroes have an opportunity to rescue the object of their affections as well. For Harry, his moment of truth comes when a tornado ravages the town where Betty and the other racers are staying. And Harold? Well, he's licking his wounds when a letter comes from his publisher telling him that they've decided to publish his book after all. So, now he's rich enough to marry Mary, but at the same time, he learns from his coworker that Mary's about to get married to a man who's already married. So, he sets out to put a stop to it and has quite a few more hurdles to jump along the way. and he gets there just in time. The little prospector is the only one who doesn't have to rescue his girl in the end. In fact, the shoe is on the other foot and she comes to his rescue, or at least she thinks she does. After he strikes it rich in the gold mine, he embarks on a boat where some journalists are arranging a photo shoot for him. They ask him to pose in his mining clothes and he obliges. But unbeknownst to him, Georgia has had it with Alaska and is on the same boat in steerage. Meanwhile, security is searching for a stowaway, and when they find him in his raggedy clothes, they assume he's the one. So does Georgia, and her true nature finally comes out when she offers to pay for his ticket so they won't arrest him. So, when we put all this together, we've got an Underdog's recipe for romantic success, and it's a very simple recipe at that. Only 5 ingredients. Easy peasy. Ingredient number 1. Be so inept and downtrodden that you inspire her sympathy. Ingredient number 2, keep your head held high even when others are trying to knock you down. Ingredient number 3, maintain a positive can-do attitude. Ingredient number 4, maintain courage in the face of adversity and keep your head while others are losing theirs. Ingredient number 5, and here's where you can season to taste. Either strike it rich or rescue your girl. Or better yet, strike it rich and rescue your girl. Guys, I'm telling you, if you follow all these steps, you could very well be looking at an ending like one of these. I always had a feeling she was sweet on him. Like father, like son. If you enjoyed this little romp, you might want to check out my take on the leading ladies of the Roaring Twenties. Next in this series, we'll look at the underdogs of the 1920s tragic romances. If that sounds like fun, you'll want to subscribe and hit that bell notification button so you're sure to catch it. See you next time. Until then, try some more cinema rolls. They're good for you.